Well, we might make a start of it then. So we have some people online. Let's have a sense of how many. 1, 2, 3. Amber.
I think it's Jean Freer, and Justin, and Regina.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that. And we're also recording, just to let you know. Oh, we've got a few other people popping in as well. So we're just kicking off. So if turn up the perfect time. So first of all, I think we all know Deana, but it's interesting sometimes the kinds of things that Deana gets involved in, and we're going to find out one of those today. But one of the interesting things that I found out, and I still love, is one of the papers called Disgusting Pedagogies. I just love the title of that. I think anyone who can publish a title of a paper called Disgusting Pedagogies is just brilliant. Deana, also, I'm going to take a little bit of your glory and add it to the L&M group, because Deana's also a member of the Learning with the Media Research Group. But what we're here today is to hear about this Wilson project. And one of the most fascinating bits about it is how our work within the faculty can actually be in connection with the industry. You know? And this is something that I think we're all starting to come to grips with, particularly in light of the assessment and feedback vision that that Monash has now implemented this semester. So we have a new sort of environment in which it's sort of asking us to rethink our assessment and rethink about what we might do with it and the feedback, how to make it authentic, etc. So, Deana, I'll open it up to you, and hopefully we might have a bit of question time at the end as well.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thanks everyone for coming today and to listen to me talk about a project that has been, what I feel, a long time in the making. It started early 2015, and we've only just seen the results published up online with the department in the last month. So it's quite timely to be presenting. As I sat down to put this presentation together, I realised how some ways it's really quite easy to make this project look like a really coherent, linear, well-organised project. Whereas when I think back to my experience of it, I felt quite frantic. I felt that parts of it were very haphazard. Some things just happened because I was in a room at the right time. And so it's certainly, as I presented, it certainly didn't translate as coherent as what I'm presenting it today, but you don't really want to see that side of me. So just today, I'm going to try and move the slides through.
One click first with the
Here's me presenting on like this whiz-bang technology project with the department. I can't even work the mouse.
Standard issues.
All right, sorry, my mouse has gone flat. Thank you. So that's what I'll be talking about today. I'll get right into it, shall I? So I thought I would start with the final product, and this is what's been published up on Fuse. It's the Food, Health and Wellbeing student packages, and there were 9 packages published in all, and so 9 groups of student work were selected and were seen to be, I suppose, fit for publication, and it means that 6 groups actually didn't have their work published, and so not all of the students that I'm talking about, the student group that I'm talking about today, around 2/3 of their work and their assessment work found its way onto the Fuse website. And I think that that's something we need to come to terms with around the quality of work, and at the end of the day, the quality of the work that they produced just wasn't able to be uploaded onto the web. So just to give an example of, so one of the topics that students, one group of students covered was the role of media in shaping food information and food choices. And this is just a screenshot from the web that provides you, just to give you a sense of what it is that the students are working to once I get into talking about the actual unit. So a group of, I think this is 2 students worked on this, and they developed a series of digital learning objects, and it was sequenced to teach about the role of the media in shaping food choice. So that's what the students were working towards at the end. As some of you might know, Fuse has gone through a refurbishment. And so our initial vision looked quite different to this one. And so the templates we were working off were changed as the department reconfigured and redeveloped the Fuse website. So this is actually looks much nicer than what we were originally working to, but that's just how things go when you're working with industry, and curriculum change is happening. So just to give you a little bit of background to the project, I was involved in the review panel of the VCE Food Technology Study Design, and I know that quite a few of us here at Monash are involved in different curriculum advisory panels and VCE study design reviews. But one of the things the VCAA wanted, and they were very clear about it, was they wanted a new approach to food technology. They really wanted to increase its academic integrity and to try and move food technology up the scale. Currently, and it's been perceived as a kind of a lower sort of area of study. And so with that brief and with the team that they selected, we went and set about reconfiguring the food technology study design and turned it into food studies. And I've just listed there the 4 units, and they're quite different from the food technology, the original food technology design. And so there's food origins, which looks to the history of food and cultures of food, and then takes us to food in Australia with a big focus on Indigenous foods, past and present. Food makers, a look at food industries. Now that wasn't too dissimilar, and food in the home, that kind of aligned rather well with the previous study design. Food in daily life, including science, and then food choice and wellbeing. And finally looking at food futures through a range of issues and challenges. And one of the things that we came to realise quite quickly was that the workforce capacity for teachers to be able to deliver this new study design was seen to be lacking. That there was, as we were talking and as we were moving to this new way of thinking about food and teaching about food, the group were very concerned that the teachers, it's a great idea, but the teachers wouldn't be able to actually fulfil the requirements. And at the same time that was being flagged, there was a call for expressions of interest to by Fuse, by the Department of the Digital Learning Strategy at the time, and that they wanted writers for the Fuse platform. And so I thought, this is a terrific opportunity. Why don't I work with my unit at its assessment and work with them, reconfigure assessment, so they're working towards developing packages for Fuse. And so it was a terrific timing, and sometimes these things are all about timing. And so it placed this unit, EDF3173 Food, Health and Wellbeing, in an ideal opportunity, I think, to work with the evolving study design. And it worked really well because I was obviously on the review team and I was able to feed little snippets, and I got hold of the draft documents a lot earlier than other people, and I was able to draw on those draft documents to actually set up the assessment and the project. In terms of how we worked and progressing the project forward, we forged a team and we did forge it. So we had a lot of fabulous people working with us who were really excited about this idea. So we had the VCAA curriculum manager, Lee Compton, who was overseeing the redevelopment of the food studies study design. We had the digital learning, one of the digital learning project workers, Rachel Crellin, who also happened to work with Home Economics Victoria part-time, so that was a coup. We had some Monash academic staff really interested and heavily involved, and that's Amber and Kelly, who were fabulous working alongside us with this particular project. We had some Monash professional staff, and in particular Candice and Christian, and they were really instrumental to the success of this project because they were in the TLS on a Wednesday when we had classes, and they were able to help us troubleshoot the technological problems that we incurred and help work with students and support their work around developing the digital learning objects. But so together it was a fairly excited team, and I think a really competent team to progress this work forward. We then looked at the same time I was looking at securing faculty funding, and I spoke to Alan Reid and Susan Kenton. I put in for a bid and I was successful, and I got $5,000, which was really helpful because it allowed me to buy in a project worker and support to help with this particular unit. You certainly, to do something like this on your own would be a full-time job, and so funding was really integral as this was a startup. I then went about doing some horizontal and vertical mapping of the course, and for those, there's a few of us in this room who've been engaged in that process, and it was quite interesting. I was trying to look to see what the students already had done and what I could actually build on vertically, but also what I could riff off horizontally. And I thought that was a good idea, but it turned out to be a lot more difficult to just assume what people had done and what I could riff off horizontally. So it was undergraduate. And so in lots of ways, I ended up having to kind of think about this unit in isolation because it became really complex to think about what we could assume and what we could riff off. And I think that that's an interesting discussion to have perhaps later on. We then set about developing templates with the department that would actually fit with the FUSE requirements. FUSE wasn't really asking for lesson plans, it was asking for digital learning objects, and it was one of the first times they'd thought about actually sequencing, like developing sequences of activities. And so we had to come up with a new template for the students to work off that would sit with the FUSE requirements and make for easy translation from the template into the online environment. And since then, we've actually found out that the department are actually using the template we developed for future learning sequence development. So that was good to be able to contribute to that. We then went on to develop a support website for developing digital objects, because it was one thing to expect that students would start to develop these wonderful whiz-bang digital learning objects, but we knew that they would need a significant amount of support. And so Amber and Kelly and Candice and Christian and Rachel also developed this wonderful web page, which I'll go to in a moment, that students could actually use as a starting place to help them set up their website if they wanted to do one, or to develop a Kahoot. And if I hear that Kahoot music once more in my life, I think I might scream. But to develop various learning objects. And then we had to scaffold the unit developing assessment tasks. So that all took place in semester 1. So I just wanted to share with you this Creating Digital Learning Objects site, because it was and has been quite integral to, I think, some of the successes I've had in units that I've taught that ask students to actually do some kind of development of digital learning objects. And I don't think Kelly's here, so she won't know.
Hi, and welcome to our webpage, which has been designed to support you as you create digital learning objects for learning and teaching. You can see on the left-hand side of the website that there are various pages. All you need to do is click on one of those pages, and there will be videos and instruction manuals and support, links to support mechanisms to help support your creation of topics.
I should have played Guess Whose Voice That Is actually before telling it was Kelly. So this website, in any unit that I've used or asked students to do any of this kind of work, this has been really helpful, because students can go here and it actually gives them instructions, and there's lots of videos throughout the website that take students step by step through developing different digital learning objects. And what was interesting, I didn't put the table up, but I thought students would actually use that and leave it at that, but what we found was that students maybe did one thing off that particular website and found all of these other cool, groovy kinds of apps or technology platforms that they used. And so they kind of used that as an idea and then bounced off to and used all sorts of other different objects and platforms. So, but at the end of the day, if a student came to me and said, I don't know how to set up a web page, I could just direct them straight to that site and it takes them through step by step. Or I don't know how to do a quiz. Again, it's all there. And I know this is something I think would be really good to talk about in terms of being able to share this. It's on a Weebly at the moment, and it's just, I can't read the website up there.
So I could go there?
Anyone can go there, yeah, if you've got the address.
It's not actually digital learning.
Yeah, and so I've had some conversations with people in the education portfolio, professional staff, about looking at how can we do anything else with this? Can we turn it into perhaps, I mean, the Weebly platform's okay, but I wonder whether we can kind of improve the design of the site, and I'm sure that we can, but anyway. So that was quite important for helping students do this work, and I couldn't have gone on without it, I don't think. So, oh, now I need to get out of that, don't I? I do. Okay. So just to talk about the unit a little bit, to contextualise the work that we did. When I design units, I tend to work in modules, and I have done that for quite some time. So within one unit I have 2 modules. And module 1 is usually about developing foundational understandings, and then module 2 is often about applying those. And so with this food unit, module 1 related to the concept of schooling food, and module 2 was about studying food. And so just looking up there, module 1 really was an introduction to food study and the foundational understandings. It engaged students in thinking about the broad social, economic and political imperatives that shape and govern food in everyday life, and introduced the concept of school food trouble. And by that I mean, how are schools currently trying to address food, and what are some of the issues in relation to how they're trying to address food? And I tied assessment task 1 to that first module. It was a take-home exam that asked students to engage with some key understandings, and the key question was, what is the trouble with school food? I gave them a package of readings critiquing how schools are addressing food in contemporary times. They were required to do a synthesis of the readings and list of recommendations for curriculum development. So my thinking here was to actually get them to engage with those core understandings, those core critiques, and to think about those critiques and not actually falling into the trap that many other people have fallen into when they try to teach people about food in schools. So they were actually coming up with some very important recommendations, for example, to avoid the use of disgust and shame in their the way in which they address food. So what was interesting about this, and although it's not necessarily authentic, there was an authentic element to it, because I was getting them to think about practical recommendations that they would take forward into their curriculum development. Now, the students did the readings and engaged with the various ideas, and in terms of assessing the exams and the essay scripts, it was interesting because there was very little opinion I usually get a lot of opinion about how fabulous and important health education is and food education is, because it's going to create world peace. And a lot of creative writing as well around those sorts of concepts, but actually really containing the reading and the thinking to a particular question. It really seemed to eradicate a lot of those grand and unsubstantiated claims, and I thought that was quite interesting, and I'll show you some student feedback about it in a little while. It's quite surprising. Module 2 was, well, how do we go about studying food then? And so the second module was really geared towards the curriculum development task. We had a range of guest speakers, and we were very fortunate this particular year. So we had Lee Compton, the curriculum manager, come in and actually talk about the curriculum and the change of the curriculum, why it's changing, and providing an overview of that change. And that then gave students an understanding of how the VCAA works and what kind of topics they could pick. The Digital Learning Project Officer ran a workshop on using digital learning objects and the issues around teaching and learning with digital learning objects. We had Louise McCraig down here on sabbatical. She came in and ran a session for us. She was involved in the new curriculum, so she focused on how do we develop health literacy through our teaching, and then we had Jan Wright do a masterclass online to talk about socio-critical inquiry. So they had a fairly good range of people contributing to the sessions. What was interesting is they always think that those people know more than me, or you know how you students think, oh, it was great to have some experts in talking to us, and it's like, yeah, but you always get that, and they really do believe these people over and above any of us. But anyway, you just have to smile and go, yes, it has been good, hasn't it? So we had all of that kind of input. We also allowed students time in class to work on their projects and to troubleshoot and to storyboard and to have lots of opportunity to share their ideas and to get feedback from me and all of those other fabulous experts. So in terms of the curriculum development resource, it was done in groups. They had to select a unit area of study, key knowledge and skill, and having Lean very early on in this module allowed them to do that. So how I tend to work is everything I want them to do in the assignment I'll cover in the week. So at the end of the week, ideally they should be able to go and do something that contributes to their assignment. Now they don't always do that, but that's the idea. They've had that opportunity to do that. They were then went off to research their topic, and they prepared a background briefing paper, which is really their content in relation to their topic. Then they were to storyboard a sequence of teaching and learning strategies, thinking about really clearly what the purpose of the strategy was, what they wanted students to know and to be able to do. And then they had to start to think about what kinds of digital learning objects might help them actually facilitate student learning. In week 12, students presented an overview of their work to the class, and the class gave feedback, and I gave written feedback because to me it was a little bit more high stakes than the regular kind of assignments, because we were looking at making sure they were able to go up onto Fuse and they could support teachers in delivering the new VCE study design. And I think that as a process has worked really well, and I've used that again where before students submit final pieces, I always give them opportunity now to present in class and to give them some feedback that they can take away and then put into their final assignment work and submit. And I'm sure quite a lot of other people do that. It's hard though sometimes because of time, but in this particular case it worked quite well. I showed you earlier on the Fuse resource packages, and you've got the link, so you can, I won't show those again. But what I will talk about is some of the student feedback. So the take-home essay. So what I did, I got part of that funding I used to do research. So I did interviews with the students, and I've only just finished some interviews. I've actually got been able to talk to some students who've graduated, which has been quite interesting to hear their stories as well. I haven't talked to any students who didn't do, who weren't didn't have their work uploaded. What are you laughing at? Oh, yeah. So it was interesting, that take-home essay, because it made me really think about other essays that I've set that aren't kind of like set around an exam, and how the students took that essay and that much more seriously than they did a regular essay that you would set. And what was interesting is they said, I've never had to use the readings before for any assignments. And I was just like, and you know when you're interviewing students, or interviewing participants, and you're just like going, oh, and what? Well, just tell me about that. And they just said, you know, we've never actually, we could all, in some of them actually said they could get away with passing the assignment without doing any of the readings. But for this, they felt that they had to do the readings.
Deana, just a question, I'll check my question. Did you have to register that as an exam?
No, because it was take home.
So
yeah.
Take home tomorrow.
Yeah, and it was in the unit guide. It was the exam, so it could have been an exam at the end of the semester. But I pulled it forward and set it up as a take-home exam to use it as a kind of foundational concept building activity. So that, and it worked quite well, I think. But it was interesting, that kind of thing around the readings. I was like, oh. And that's not for everyone. Like, I mean, these are a particular group of students at a particular stage in their course, and that's what they were.
That's the one and third year?
No, these second and third years.
Oh,
yeah.
How long? What was the time frame to take them to do?
They had a week and a half. So I released the package, the reading package, and oh no, sorry, they had 10 days. So they had 10 working days to do the.
So you set up the readings that they used. Could they move outside of that reading? They had to use the readings that you provided.
Yep.
And did they have to use all of them? Did you mandate how many?
Yep.
And so how many were in that package? 6.
And so what they did was they actually had to engage with the key ideas, and all the readings are critiques of school food. So one was around use of shame and disgust in educating about food. One was around corporatisation, so how Nestle are involved in, teaching, developing resources packages about food. Rosie's article was in there, the medicalisation of food knowledges in primary schools. And so, yeah, so they did that. It was really quite interesting. I really actually quite liked it, but obviously I just think it was interesting, the insights around how students do essays and how they think about exams and how they think about assessment. Yeah, they were surprised that we wrote articles, and it felt weird reading articles of ours, but that's just how it is. All right, so in terms of, they worked in groups for that second assignment, which I'm always quite anxious about, because you can have some good experiences and you can have some bad ones, but the ones who had their work uploaded all loved working in their groups. They loved selecting who they were to work with. They thought it was much better than being pegged with people they didn't know or weren't as kind of high achieving.
So the groups could be as big or small as they wanted.
I had a limit of 2 to 3, so they selected who they wanted to work with. But it was a small group, like I was working with, I think, 35 students. So it was relatively easy to organise. It's very different when you've got a bigger cohort. One group didn't work, it malfunctioned, and it malfunctioned. So one of the things I get them to do is to keep Google Doc to keep track of record and progress. And when I went in there to have a look at why it malfunctioned, is because both of them hadn't been in there doing any work. So, and that they didn't like that. But it's like, well, you haven't been in here doing any work, so it's hard to.
So did you then say, do some work and then you've got something to play with, or did you break it up?
No, I said you're going to have to start to work together. And we had a conference around that, and that kind of translated into they did something. It was a bare pass, but it certainly didn't get uploaded. And they didn't care. Like this group was, they didn't care about the fact that it was an authentic assessment task, that they could have an opportunity to upload it. They said they didn't think it was relevant. And I was just like, I just can't believe you've said that. Like, how could you not get anything? Anyway, that was that group. But apart from that, and there's people I haven't heard from, of course. So we're not quite sure about everyone's experience. And it was interesting that students were very articulate around when they're put into groups and why they're put into groups. And so for some of them that had experience of being put into groups for tasks they didn't think really suited a group task. And, very savvy around why they think that happens. But they thought that this task was ideal for group work, and they really appreciated having somebody to work with because they also thought it was high stakes. For those people who really invested in it, they thought this is high stakes. We've got a real opportunity here. We want to do well.
Where was the placement of the assessment tasks? Because you had 2.
Yeah.
So when were they due?
The exam was due in week 5-ish. And then the final curriculum development task was due in slot back.
Are we talking semester 1 or?
Semester 2. So in terms of how students felt about assessment in authentic contexts, some of them said they were more anxious than usual. Like they said that they're anxious, and because it was a big deal, they thought it was something they could use. One of them hated technology, so they didn't like me very much. But it's interesting, I interviewed her and she's out teaching and she's now being called on to run professional learning. So she got called into a school to run a health and wellbeing day using Snapchat. And like she seemed to be like a leader in the field. And if I could just tell them what she was like in week 1 when I talked about this task, it would have been very different. But she's out there like doing all this incredible stuff with social media and technology. And as you see, she says, I'm mad for it now. Some students thought it was too much work, and I agree with them. It was too much work. So they're just some of the comments there. And then down there, somebody said it helped me get a job. So one of the students went for a job in a school that was really privileging and valuing IT, and they showed the interview panel the link, and it was the prior link, and they just thought it was fabulous, and that they could actually showcase their IT skills. And I mean, she got the job for a whole range of other reasons, but she said that was useful. So my thoughts, just very quickly. It was a lot of work, and I'm very grateful to the team and for the funding, because without the group of people who worked with me and the funding, it couldn't have happened. I really enjoyed working with students in this particular way, kind of shifting the process to more sort of project-based work in class and kind of thinking about how we actually work with the input around developing students' understandings and concepts, and so using a range of different blended learning opportunities, guest speakers and hands-on work. I think this group of students was second semester, second year, some third years, first year got in there somehow, and I actually think it is a task for later years, and I actually think it would be ideal in methods, given the nature of the work that we're doing. The partners that we worked with, the VCAA and the department and the Home Eco Association, are really pleased with the outcome. And as I said, the website's only been up for maybe a month, and there's been over 200 hits on some of the sites. Additionally, though, what comes out, I think, of working with partners, which is interesting, is that there are lots of other potential connections. And so one of the students' background briefing papers was published in a professional association journal. So Rachel was quite taken by their content, and so she asked whether she could publish it, and they were. That we ended up having the VCE Food Studies professional learning seminars at Berwick, and our students were able to go to those. So once they started to trot out all the professional learning, we could open that up for our students, and we had teachers coming into Berwick and being part of that. And also just recently, one of my graduates, or our graduates I should say, had been invited to present at a professional association conference, and she emailed me to have a look at her slides and wanted some feedback, but she was off to present at a conference, and she was perceived as an innovator with the work she was doing. So that's pretty fabulous, and that's, I think, as a result of having partners engaged with our units and our unit development and our assessment, and yeah, all sorts of things can kind of come from that. Yeah, that's just me kind of oscillating wildly about this. Yeah, and kind of thinking not enough discipline knowledge. Like I wanted to get more into the politics and economics of food and food choice. The students probably didn't want me to get more into that, but I certainly did. And then like working with digital learning, I didn't really do any kind of foundational conceptual work with them around digital learning, so I kind of felt that wasn't done very well. And then you put the two things that aren't done very well together, and you wonder about what comes out of it. So I just felt compromised quite a lot, and I think, part of that was feeling like the unit was trying to do too much, and trying to, moving forward, thinking about that horizontal and vertical kind of mapping and how we might do that better. And I know in this course now they've got a unit on digital. I think, did that happen, the digital learning unit?
Yes, that's coming in next.
Yeah, and so whereas if we had have had that digital learning unit, yeah, so that kind of unit, in addition with the study on food, put those things together, and I think the output would have been better. But because we just compromised. I felt compromised quite a lot. Didn't stop me, but
I love that one. It's so interesting. I wonder who also speaks to the tussle around the pointer line units and what happens when we bring the outside in to a unit, and the traditions that we work with around what has to happen first, second, third.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was tricky, and I think also just on that. What was I going to say? Oh, I felt a little bit better when I was talking to the students, because they started to say that actually thinking about how they were to teach it made them engage with the content more deeply. So I kind of went, oh, that makes me feel a bit better about the discipline knowledge, because they said that they really felt they had to know that in order to be able to translate it into a learning experience, and that made me feel better about it. But I still think that, we didn't really pay a lot of attention to digital learning and some of the insights we could glean from digital learning. So in looking forward, these are a couple of things that have come out of this project and we've been building on. So I'm currently about to start work with sociology, some lecturers in sociology of consumption, to develop some authentic assessment with them around food and health, and so to try and move away from essays and maybe looking at using some of their work to use on Fuse or something similar. Rosie, Zane and myself have just heard news of a grant that's going to support us to do some work with the Royal Botanic Gardens to kind of reconfigure this but develop Indigenous food digital learning resources, which is exciting because one of the things that's coming back, so food design, study design is in its first year and the teachers are really struggling with Indigenous food and they're quite scared actually to teach it because I think they'll teach it wrongly. Yeah, so so we thought we would try and do something around that. And then one of the other grants we've got, Rosie and I, are looking at using exhibitions and learning. So how can we kind of move our thinking away from websites to thinking about digital learning exhibitions? And I've just been involved with the VCAA Health and Human Development rewrite of the study design. So again, I've got a sense of what the changes are and what the gaps will be. And so I'm working with the VCAA and about to do this all again with 5142, but differently. So
Can I just ask, what's the difference between what you've got there named as digital learning exhibitions and what you've refused?
Yep.
What's the difference?
So I'm in a virtual world, and that's me, slightly looking a little different than what I normally look, but I've got a blue t-shirt on. And there's an exhibition room over there, and there's actually a lecture theatre behind the graffiti wall. And so we're setting up a health ed lab, and we're looking at having an exhibition for each VCE unit study design. And we're going to work with our students in Health Methods B to, they'll give them an exhibition space each, and we're going on a trip to the museums. They've got a new health humans exhibition, and we're going to try and think about exhibition learning and developing some assessment where students cultivate or curate their own exhibition in there. Yeah, because real space is really hard to come by and they cost a lot of money. So that's kind of, that's the difference. And there's our little lecture theatre, and you'll see a little Monash University on the thing there. But we're just building that.
How will you, once it's done, how will you then make that more public so that it becomes more range of involved?
Yeah, so at the end of it, once we've set it all up and we've got the exhibition space, we're going to invite key partners in. So we'll have, and so we'll actually have Narita, who's the curriculum manager, and some other lead teachers, and hopefully somebody from museums, Victoria on the new humans exhibit, will come in, we'll invite them in, and they'll go through the exhibition and provide feedback. And then we hope to keep building on it and have a more, a larger food exhibition, which is done by academics. So we're just going to keep adding exhibition space. So that's kind of where we got to, and it's all come out of that first sort of run through of, you know, that idea in 2015. And I'll leave it there because there's lots of possibilities. I think it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts and
Got
ideas.
a question from Justin O'Connor. Was there a second round of feedback? Sorry, was there a second round of feedback and editing prior to publishing to sort out potentially not quite right content?
Yes. So part of the funding from the faculty was used to pay a project worker who actually happened to be Rachel Crellin to go through and to do that. I would probably say her eye is quite different to mine. There were some things that got through that I didn't particularly like. But yeah, there was certainly that filter process. And she was the kind, she had the final say, her and Lee Compton, the curriculum manager.
And is there a capacity on Fuse? Will they take less and less content each year?
I imagine so, and I've had conversations about trying to actually think about how we might at how the faculty might actually set up something similar, so we're not reliant on views, because it does take, it makes you create, it makes the assessment look a particular way that isn't necessarily, it hits some of the kind of things you want it to, but I think we could do something a little bit different. I'd like to introduce a trip advisor kind of report, so students who actually used our resources or teachers who did could actually do a trip advisor review. So then you get that implementation, which would be able to, if you look at the professional teacher standards, that this kind of work needs to be implemented to be able to tick off that ICT standard. So it would be good to be able to have that function as well.
But it's not just about the ICT, it's wonderful evidence for engaging professional practice and engage with colleagues and improve practice and all that. That standard 6 is beautiful evidence. That kind of evidence.
Yeah, and I met with Ruth just recently to talk about it, and we did some mapping, and that slide fell off the presentation. There's my great technology skills. I don't know where it went, but I met with Ruth to do that mapping, and we did say in 6, but also the resources, I think 4, it was, and content and sequencing. So there's quite a few, and some of them are partial in terms of the standards, but there is lots of opportunity there for students, and Monash, I think, to showcase innovative curriculum development and lead the way. And I keep thinking, it's relying on curriculum change, but of course we're in continual curriculum flux, so.
But not only, because I know my students do their work at the end of the year, they're not as exciting as this, but we do post a lot on social media and units, sequence lessons and so on. So they have an audience beyond me reading it or them using it in the future. They have an authentic audience within their professional community. It actually does round it up for them in terms of their attitude to and their commitment to actually do the work. Clearly that's happening to yours.
Yeah, it does. And I think, what's interesting is just that I know that there are lots of people doing similar work, but not having necessarily a forum by which to know what other people are doing or what. So it'd be good to try and do something.
So we have a question from Jean Freer. Was there any focus on sustainability in food?
There was, and the 4th unit of that, of the food studies design is really largely about sustainability. And some of the students decided to focus on sustainability. I can't remember whether they got up or not, but it's certainly a big part of it. Students selected what they did. So that's all I can say, Jean.
I rather like the idea that not all students got published, as in there is a benchmark that stands to one side of our grading system with the benchmark as well, and so it has this other aspect of the authenticity.
Yeah.
Did you have much feedback about that?
No, not specifically, other than they knew it was high stakes, and that they knew that curriculum people, proper experts were involved in discerning the quality. So they knew that was layered, and I kept saying to them, you might, get a good grade for this, but it still might not get up into up to the Fuse platform, and they knew that, and they seemed to be fairly appreciative of it. Some students didn't even try. They were just so nonplussed about the whole idea. But the majority of students did really value the opportunity. Well, we're doing it with Indigenous foods this year, so we said that we would do that. So it's up for I think round 3 of this year.
Justin says thank you very much, and he's keen to talk about the VR stuff.
Oh, terrific! I look forward to that, Justin. Thank you. Virtual reality.
Who made that thing?
So I'm working with Lisa Jacker, who Michael knows, and I did some work with her a little while ago when I was at Southern Cross University on teaching in virtual spaces, and so she's some of the funding we've got is she's we're paying her to build a site and to think about learning within that space.
So she's from Southern Cross.
Yeah. But she'll work with us next semester to do a lot of the troubleshooting and exhibition installation, thankfully. I won't have to do that. Yeah.
I really like the stories about how students have used it afterwards, how it's helped them get jobs and things like that, because I find a lot of these types of projects do have that, and it was from my own experience with my master's as well, that these larger projects that then go on and become something can be used, evidence or even experience to just talk about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that that's one of the outcomes.
I think it's one of the best outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thanks everyone for doing it.